Rolling along here on Villanova Sports Talk here on this special edition episode on Sunday, March 30th. Glad you could join us. A new head coach on the main line, Kevin Willard, as announced earlier this morning. Glad you could join us. David Szczepanski alongside Stephen Cain. Such a great first segment as always, Steve, breaking down our initial reactions to Kevin Willard being hired as the men's basketball head coach. And a lot of the positives for Kevin Willard, without trying to make excuses, of course. I think that, his head coaching record and what he's done at different programs does speak for itself. But we will talk about kind of the negatives, if you will, to the hire. Because with every coach, there's some baggage, there's some positives and negatives. We'll talk about that. Before we do so, I do want to talk about, we'll mention a couple quotes here from Villanova President Father Peter Donahue, and then, of course, the athletic director and vice president of the school, Eric Rodel. First, this is from Father Peter Donahue. Villanova put out a press release earlier this morning at 9:54 a.m. You can read the full thing on my Twitter at WXVU David S. This is what Father Peter had to say this morning. Coach Willard quickly stood out among an impressive pool of candidates during a comprehensive national search. Throughout the process, Coach Willard demonstrated that he has the vision and experience to guide Villanova basketball in the changing world of college athletics. Beyond his notable success on the court, we were also impressed by his ability to articulate how Villanova basketball fits into the overarching mission of the university. From Eric Rodel, again, Villanova's vice president and director of athletics, Coach Willard, this is beginning the quote, Coach Willard is an outstanding leader of young men and brings extensive experience and success as a head coach to Villanova. We are excited about the future of Villanova basketball under his leadership and look forward to welcoming Coach, his wife Julie, and their sons Colin and Chase to the Villanova community. And then it goes on to talk about his success and success at Seton Hall, of course, which we talked about, success at Maryland. And this is from Kevin Willard himself. My family and I would like to thank the Villanova Board of Trustees, President Father Peter Donahue and Eric Rodel for this incredible opportunity. Villanova basketball has a deep tradition of excellence and a culture that is second to none in college basketball. We are thrilled to be a part of it and join the Villanova community. Willard is a native of Huntington, New York, and he will take over as the successor of Kyle Neptune. Technically becomes the 10th head coach in Villanova program history. However, since Coach Nardi will coach a game with an interim head coaching tag, technically the 11th, but Villanova calling him the 10th head coach in Villanova program history. So Kevin Willard becoming the next head coach. I think Steve and I are definitely on the more positive side of things for Kevin Willard, thinking it's a good hire. You can vote, though, on my Twitter at WXVU David S. Did Villanova make the right decision by hiring Kevin Willard? Yes or no? We'll discuss in about 20 minutes, Steve. All right. It is time to talk about the baggage that comes with Kevin Willard as a head coach here on the main line. And I think, we did address one of the arguments in the first half of the show, which is the fact that he hasn't won a national championship, hasn't won a national title. He hasn't made it past the Sweet 16 as a head coach. Of course, his best season coming this year with Maryland. That is the first part of it. But also, too, is just his media personality, which, Steve, we talked about, and I think Dom and I might have talked about a little bit more about Mick Cronin. And I was against Mick Cronin coming here to the main line because I was strongly against some of the stuff that he had said to the media. I just don't think that fits Villanova and its culture. When you think about a guy like Jay Wright, who, when you bring up the name Villanova, 99.9% of the people, when you ask them, who is the person you associate with Villanova, it's Jay Wright. They would not, they would tell you that, calm, cool, collected when you think of Jay. When you think of even Coach Neptune, there wasn't many times, there were times, of course, when he would show emotion on the court, but for the most part, he was stoic for the most part. And that's a Villanova thing of trying to be calm throughout different situations as best that they can. And I didn't think Mick Cronin was the right hire because, some of the stuff he said to the media, I just didn't think had fit the Villanova program. And you could argue that Kevin Willard is in that same camp, right? He came out. This was right around, like I said, the beginning of March Madness. This was put out by Inside Maryland Sports, the same outlet that reported it. He talked about, how he's negotiating for more resources for the basketball program, brought up a situation where he wanted the team to stay an extra night in New York, and the team, or basically the program, didn't give him the funds to do so, to kind of help them out to see family and friends during the holidays. So there were some things that he was unhappy about and, voiced it to, the world, voiced it to the media in a press conference before March Madness, which, considering that his team was about to play, in games and had a legitimate chance to win the whole tournament, you could argue that, it wasn't the best look for Willard and his camp. And then, of course, kind of throughout the whole process, when he was rumored to Villanova, there were circumstances where, he played it off. Sometimes, like I said earlier, he didn't show up to, didn't call into the one show, regardless, whatever the reason was.
Yeah.
Then he comes back on the afternoon, gives a very kind of passive-aggressive answer. As of right now, I'm staying. So there were definitely reasons for why the fan base really separated from him at Maryland. And really, that was, in my opinion, also played a big role in, him deciding to leave and come to Villanova. He didn't really have the support of the fans anymore. Once it was rumored, and once he had said these things about the Maryland program, I think a lot of people, majority of, the Terrapin fans had turned against him because, as we talked about, Steve, Maryland has really, with the attention that they've gotten, obviously with Derek Queen and Julian Reese play a big part in that, but they've gotten a lot of good attention, and, they've been rising in college basketball. When you hear that your head coach that has taken you there is not happy, let's say is not fully happy, this is kind of, summarizing what he said, putting it in my own words, but, basically that he wasn't happy about the funding, wasn't happy about, kind of the direction of the program with NIL, that tends you to not think so highly of the guy for if you're a fan of the Terrapins and, wanting him to continue to lead the program, even though, really in all honesty, he was being honest about his situation. So Steve, want to get your thoughts on that because I know that, that is one of the biggest things that a lot of people on social media are saying, especially a lot of Maryland fans, that there was reason for them to kind of split from Coach Willard based off some of his public statements.
Yeah.
Regardless of the situation, I can see where they're coming from in that circumstance. So Steve, want to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think they're completely justified. I think Kevin Willard did not handle it well at all, and I think you hit the nail on the head. The big reason why was all of the concerns are valid, and he talked about how he was being honest, but there's a time and a place for things, and that was the worst time, the worst place to be talking about, oh, we didn't have space in some hotel room. And even if that's true, you just don't say that. You had such a great season, and you had these negotiations. He should have just been more tight-lipped about it, and that's why I said earlier, kind of hinted at it, like Villanova did a good job, and that's why I commended Eric Rodel and Father Peter for...
Well, it's not a good job for us media when they're tight-lipped like that.
Not a good job for the media, but from a negotiation business perspective, it's respectful to Maryland as
Steve
well.
is a business major, so you can
so
provide that business background on PR.
Yeah, these perspectives, and with the fact, again, that Villanova tried to keep a tight lid on things as much as they could, they realized, hey, it's not just beneficial for us, but also for Maryland as well, because if they were out and about boisterous and really trying to get him and being vocal about it, then it would have made things awkward, and then it would have made things contentious between Willard and the fan base even more. But Kevin Willard, he did this to himself. He did this completely to himself, and I understand, and again, and we kind of hinted at it along the way, like, yes, the portal, the timeline, it sucks. It's not a good time to be having these things, and you're kind of forced into it. But in my opinion, again, Kevin Willard, he should have just really not said anything, even though when there's smoke, there's fire, and you could say, oh, this dude's definitely lying, or oh, he definitely is taking the Villanova job. It just would have been more respectful and would have given the impression that he was more locked in on making a deep run with this Maryland team. And we talked about it. It was a really good and a really fun season. And yeah, I mean, my heart kind of aches, I think, for Maryland fans a little bit. I can't believe I'm saying that after they beat us by 1 in late November, but that was a really good game. I mean, they were a really good team, and in retrospect, again, they deserved to win, and they were a really solid team. They still made it out of the first weekend. And all of the vibes with the Crab Five and Maryland basketball being back, and you had some recruits coming in. They have a 4-star Chris Jeffries coming in next year, a Maryland commit that was coming in, and the vibes were high. And instead, Kevin Willard, he ruins it by playing this cat and mouse game where he's like, as of right now, I'm still the head coach. I'm hinting at it, but I'm also not going to outright say it. I think he should have just been been very quiet about it. And sure, people are going to say, like, the media would say, like, oh, that's probably not true or whatever, but you see what he's doing, and it is a tough situation that yeah, you kind of have to, like, lie in a way and be like, but I'm focused on this team and the moment now. So it really does, it leaves unfortunately, it does leave a bit of a poor taste, I think, in some of the Villanova fans' mouths, I think, too, in addition to Maryland, just how because someone was people were talking about this too on social media, that he did a similar thing when leaving Seton Hall. When he left Seton Hall, he did the same thing where he's like, oh, I don't know. I haven't, I don't know. I'm not sure. As of right now, I'm still the coach. And then he ended up kind of dipping unceremoniously. And then he does the same thing to Maryland. So I thought he handled it very poorly. And again, I can't verify this because I haven't watched a ton of Kevin Willard press conferences, but Maryland fans, and they could just be really upset at him, and it was very disheartening. But they talked about him kind of being abrasive, not like not being a guy that gives a ton during these media post-game press conferences. Again, I don't know if that's true, but again, a lot of Maryland people were talking about it, and again, you assume that they know a lot more than we would know about Coach Willard than we do, right? He just became our head coach a couple hours ago, so. In summation, I just thought it was handled very poorly. I think that he should have just kept quiet and just focused more. Because again, and this is just my personal opinion, we don't know, but there were reports too that before the Florida Maryland Sweet 16 game, Florida destroyed Maryland in that game. That apparently he didn't show up to the team dinner. Again, I don't know if that's 100% true, but it just seems that. Well, was he fully locked in? I'm not sure. And I think that, again, playing this cat and mouse game with the media and kind of being 50-50. And again, there's just a lot of these things that, again, are rumors. But if there's all these rumors, some of them probably, there's probably some truth to the fact that he probably wasn't totally focused on this March Madness run, which I think is really disheartening. And yeah, he just left on a really bad note. But again, hopefully it gets cleaned up. And I also understand that the transfer portal stuff doesn't make this any easier, but I hope with Villanova that at least with Coach Willard, he realizes I didn't handle that well, and he kind of takes it on the chin.
I think too, Steve, when you look at his comments, and also too, most notably over the past couple of days, he had the quote where I said, I don't know what I'm doing, I haven't talked to my agent, I haven't talked to my wife, I made a promise to this team that I would focus on this team, that's all I've done, and then they clipped out, I don't know what I'm doing, and now it's a big meme. With that being said, about Willard and Steve, like you said, there is a time and a place for everything. And to talk about that situation where he wanted to stay in New York with the team to celebrate Christmas for an extra day, they said that it was too expensive. Basically, that was kind of the whole thing that had happened with the hotel room in that situation. If looking back on hindsight's always 20/20, probably shouldn't have brought it up publicly at a press conference at all.
No.
But if he was to do so, probably should have brought it up when it first happened.
Yeah, that's
not when you are at a March Madness press conference, getting ready for the tournament when your team has a legitimate chance to win the whole thing.
Yeah, Final Four. Maybe.
And, as you said, Steve, it didn't seem like he was fully locked in, but also because I think there was so much attention around, these media availabilities, these press conferences, that, he was constantly getting attention, especially in the DMV, especially, in the Maryland area, to come on shows and talk about his next step. And I think a lot of that, even though a lot of coaches, like to say, oh, we don't pay attention to the media, it's out there. Nowadays, when you have your phone is always next to you, even when you're asleep, it's next to you on your table, it is impossible to completely disconnect from the world and not see any of these rumors. And just how much he added to it did not help his case, did not help his situation. But like you said, Steve, hopefully he and his camp and his agents have realized that was not the best way to handle things moving forward. And hopefully now that he's at Villanova, hopefully he's here for a long time. And hopefully he realizes, and has success obviously, but hopefully he realizes that was not the proper way to handle things. But, the reason why we bring this up is not to, we obviously sung a lot of praise for Kevin Willard in the beginning, but is to acknowledge that there are some faults, like every single coach. And, what people have said on social media, there's valid reason for concern here. Some of the ways, like you said, Steve, that he's gotten out of programs. But I think that's with a lot of coaches nowadays. We've always had the conversation about, not always, but over the past few years, but with the transfer portal, that, players, they aren't loyal, they're going to leave right away. There's a good argument that coaches are just not as loyal.
Yeah.
And you look at Sean Miller, leaving Xavier, playing, Texas, beating Texas, and then after the game, when he was asked a question about Illinois, I don't care, we just won, and then he gets blown out.
Yeah.
Wasn't a head coach again for Xavier.
Yeah, and that was an argument, too, with players and the portal. That's kind of another underrated argument, was coaches have been doing this even before the portal. So players were like, well, if my coach is just doing these last second dips to different programs, like, why can't I, right? And why can't I, kind of leave in that sense, and like, I demand the attention. But yeah, continue. So.
I agree with that, Steve. Thanks for adding that. And I think, completely here, it is a proper, reason to be concerned about some of the things he said. But, I do have hope that, like I said, Eric Rodel is, the administration is in, it's the right people for the job. They're in a good spot. I like that, you are bringing, a coach like, we've said that has had a lot of success. Maybe not so much in the NCAA tournament, but like I said, it is hard to win. And, for Villanova, Steve, as we've talked about throughout this whole show, just to get back to March Madness and see what happens would be a big plus for this program next year, especially considering you haven't broken that 20-win hump the past 3 seasons. And, Kevin Willard did it pretty easily at Seton Hall and did it easily in 2 of the 3 years at Maryland, having 27 wins this year, being a top 15, top 10 team in the country for most of the season. So I think it definitely is more positive. I'm excited about this hire, when it's all said and done, all in all.
Yeah.
I think when a lot of the names that were out there, Ryan Odom, I think would have been great for the program, as an up-and-coming coach. I liked Richard Pitino a lot, especially in the beginning. Now he goes to Xavier. But when you look at the possibility to have a head coach that has just went to the Sweet 16, that has had success at, pretty much every single stop, and, something in addition to that, Steve, that we haven't really talked about is there's been a lot of noise about, okay, maybe Kevin Willard hasn't been locked in. People, the fan base is upset with him about some of the things he said. You can't argue that even throughout this whole entire season, his team played really tough for him. And, I know that you have a lot of guys on that team that are getting NBA draft attention, and to not play hard for your coach is not playing hard for yourself, because you're trying to get, the best draft and the best draft stock as possible for a player, especially like Derek Queen. But with all that being said, is that, even in moments where, Willard didn't make his case better by going on radio stations and going on things and saying that, I might not stay, or as of right now, he didn't say I might not stay, but as of right now, I'm staying. That didn't change the course of the way his team played. And I know that you can make the argument, okay, they were blown out by Florida. Florida's a really good basketball team.
Yeah.
And, I know that Maryland is too, but when you look at, overall, they did get blown out, but they didn't get blown out to, any 16 seed, any 15 seed. They got blown out to a really good team. All in all, Florida could win this tournament, coming up very soon. So I don't think that, that is a huge factor here. His team did play tough for him, and I think that shows what kind of the head coach he is. I know there were different quotes at press conferences where his players stuck up for him, and I'm sure that there is some disappointment around the program, disappointment with some of the players that he left, especially in the circumstances he did, and I think that's valid. But I think overall I feel more positive about this hire, but I do want to admit that there is valid reason for people to feel skeptical. I just think that Villanova has done the right things. When you look at not always the right things lead to success. Sometimes it takes some more time. Sometimes things just don't work out, and you can press all the right buttons, but maybe it doesn't lead you in the right direction. But overall, I think that Villanova has done a really nice job after Mark Jackson left to bring in Eric Rodel to get the program, a really up-and-coming name that maybe wasn't a household name, but I think that Rodel has the possibility with what he's done with Oregon and coming back to, his alma mater. And now you have a coach like Kevin Willard who has, been successful, who has a lot of experience, also in the Big East. So I'm excited, Steve.
Yeah, I'm excited too. One more thing about the whole how he handled the exit, and you talked about that is true that really all season the players played hard for Kevin Willard, but I think that just makes that situation pretty disheartening because you do forget, again, March Madness, it's a very hectic tournament. They're on the ropes to Colorado State and Nick Clifford. He hits that shot. Colorado State's up 1, and then Derek Queen, probably the moment of the tournament. There hasn't been like a ton of like buzzer beaters. Like Texas Tech Arkansas was a good game, but that was a true buzzer beater. Derek Queen hits it. Maryland didn't play their best, but they win. And then and this is when the smoke was starting to arise about Kevin Willard to Villanova, and they had these interviews, and I like with March Madness, like they interviewed the coach, but then they had all the players behind him, and like and you could hear a couple of the guys being like, "That's our coach," and like it was a very cool moment. But then as things got worse, I think things deteriorated pretty quickly, and I think a counter to that is, Florida's really good, but just to me, like I watched some of that game. And Maryland, they fought a little bit, but and again, maybe it's me projecting my own viewpoint to the game, but Florida turned it over like 15 plus times, and Maryland's a good team at forcing those turnovers, and they still lost by 16. They were only 6-point underdogs. I know that, again, Florida's really good. Them and Duke are one of the two teams that fit all the national championship trends, so they could be destined to win the whole thing. But before Thursday, and people were talking about it with Villanova, like that do you wait for Maryland to lose? But I remember telling people, and a lot of people were saying, hey, Maryland's only a 6-point underdog. It's one game. It's 40 minutes. You get one hot half. And maybe you steal that one. So I just think in that last game, like, maybe there wasn't as much of the effort that you talked about. But again, we saw that all year. But that just makes it that much more disheartening, because again, you fight back, you play poorly against Colorado State, you win, and you think maybe that kind of regalvanizes things. Like, things started to fall apart, and then they ended up just getting worse. And again, you played Florida. That was a tough way to go. But again, I think there's more positives than negatives. You talked about it. I think, again, the Pitino coaching tree stuff is huge. The defense was excellent, especially on the interior, just to reiterate what we were talking about earlier, making the tournament. And offensively as well, 4 of the last 6 years of Coach Willard-led teams, top 60 in offensive efficiency. 2 out of the 3 in Maryland had a top 40 offense in the first season that he came to Maryland. I think looking at the first year he came to Maryland is a good benchmark, since next year will be the first year he comes to Villanova. They went 22-13. They had a top 50 offense, top 40 defense, and they were a really solid program, and they played slow. This seems this seems like something that could be repeated on the main line. So generally I'm excited, but just how it ended for Maryland, just that really has to stink. And you feel like it just when it feels like they were getting something going, they kind of have to really start from ground zero. But again, one team's failure could be another team's success. This could be the hire that really brings us out of the so-called dark ages the past few years and brings us back to the NCAA tournament, and then maybe beyond, maybe some success, who knows. So
Sure. I also think, something as we said here, unfortunately basketball is about money nowadays, and that's what sports has really come to.
Yeah.
A lot of it is about the economics, and, for Willard, he saw an opportunity to go to a program that is going to give, basketball more money, or, more overall of its total funds than what Maryland was going to when you compare it to their FBS football program. And, in terms of a contract, he gets the opportunity to come here to Villanova. We don't know any of the contract details. I doubt that it will be revealed, because Kyle Neptune's contract wasn't publicly revealed.
Yeah.
But I would imagine it's a nice chunk of change when it's all said and done. So, Steve, as you can vote on my poll question on my Twitter at WXVU David S., did Villanova make the right decision by hiring Kevin Willard? I think the listeners know that I'm in the yes camp.
Yeah.
Steve, where do you fall?
Yeah, I would say yes as well, but I will say this, and this will probably be the last time it's ever brought up. There is an alternate reality, because, and again, this feels so long ago, but on Tuesday, Wednesday, there was a lot of smoke and that Richard Pitino was going to be the coach for Villanova, and part of me's like, man, like, that would have been a nice hire as well. Like, Willard and Pitino are both very similar, and I'm happy they ended up getting Willard, but they could have potentially, and again, Villanova, they never offered Richard Pitino. Again, a lot of reports, but there were a lot of New Mexico reporters saying that it like, a lot of it was fake, a lot of it was smoke and mirrors. Villanova, they never.
Yeah, there was even a rumor that he was on campus here one day last
Snap
week,
Pizza or something.
and that was not the case. Richard Pitino was not on campus.
He was not, no. But someone asked him. There was a I forget the name, but a big Albuquerque reporter for New Mexico, and he was talking about how that Villanova's never really reached out. Like, they talked to Pitino, but they never put an offer on the table. And then someone said, okay, but what if Villanova did offer him the job? And they said most likely Pitino would have taken it. So there's an alternate reality where you could have had this done,
and where Pitino does well, and Willard maybe doesn't so much.
Yeah, but and too, the reason I'm saying this is that it is then you only miss out on like 2 days of the portal opening, and I think that's huge. Each passing day, again, is a missed day of talking to players, and you could have potentially got Donovan Dent, who's an All-American, really great point guard. In Villanova, they've thrived on great guard play. A lot of teams do, but especially Villanova. And True Washington was another guard. Like, he hit the portal. I just remember on Tuesday, Wednesday, there was a lot of smoke for that, and I just wanted to bring that up because I just find that fascinating that could have been like an alternate reality. Like there's a world where that happens, and Coach Pitino would be the coach of Villanova. But overall, I think the Willard thing is the right thing, and I think too that Willard was their top guy really from the get-go. I think pretty early they did a search, and Willard was the number one guy, and that didn't really change. And they ended up getting him. They ended up getting him over time. And again, the negotiations, at least on Villanova's side, I thought were handled very professionally. And again, we've talked about it, the defense, the Pitino stuff, the making the NCAA tournament, turning programs around, a good amount of positives for Kevin Willard. So I'd say yes.
According to our listeners, maybe not so positive, or at least to the people that voted, 50%, it's 50-50 even for yes or no, a right decision to hire Kevin Willard. We'll see. I mean, a lot will tell. I think a lot will also tell about the transfer portal and how it seems to players coming to the program, because something you have to also remember is that, as Steve said, there is this bad